that they're changing my voice. So this is part 2 of the Morgan Hill Lessons playlist and series. It's also going to be on the My Story playlist. So it's the story of the top martial artist ever possible, which is me, in Morgan Hill. It's a true story, being 100% honest. Keep in mind that I am a brain surgeon's son, and I was born in the early 80s. This is the true story of the top martial artist ever possible. Again, I can't stress that enough. In this period of time, I am the real life idea that Jesus returning in the Bible is superimposed on. See, my Proof I'm Christ playlist. I prove it definitively. To this day, I've been saying this, for maybe 5-6 years. There hasn't been a single viable counter argument, and many people have conceded that I'm Christ, but they've said that they don't want to be persecuted with me because they're raised poorly, because they work for the government. They have various reasons. So the story takes place in Morgan Hill, California, for the most part. I connect things to it. This is part of a series that I will make of my life story where I put videos in chronological order, and I will upload them in a way that is not chronological in order, but I'll put it in order in the playlist, so if there's some confusion there, to be consistent with my memories and inclinations to tell this story in a certain order while I'm sabotaged. The Bible is a mere fairy wash story that confuses who I am. No offense to anyone, that's the fact of the matter. One must also understand that my moves were wise no matter how you slice it. In order to appreciate the story, you must understand that. In California, there were Freemasons, CIA agents, FBI agents, and others working together to sabotage me, no matter how you slice it. They wanted me to appear to be less. The reason why has to do with the word bless, right? It's a play on words for be less. As they think that if I, quote-unquote, be less, that it will bless their Luciferian agenda and their fake church, movements and their various movements that require people not understanding that they're complete idiots, for not obeying God through me and, what have you. In their mind, that if they don't cover up who I am, all the greedy people in the world will magically find God and find virtue and rally to me. Some people would rally to me, but the vast, vast majority wouldn't. Even in their Bible, it's called a narrow path to life and a broad path to destruction. And first and foremost, because people aren't raised and bred right to receive God's divine order, they only live for their complexes. If they fight to the death, it's for their complexes. Think about it. You all know that I'm right. As I have pointed out before in my story playlist, there has been a psyop run on me for many years. As the groups that run the government are very immature, think about frats. There's lots of groups like that are immature. Rich people with their statues and their weird cuddle parties and what have you. You see a lot goes on behind the scenes, and the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel, as the Bible says. So my brother claims that my parents bought the house in '89 and we moved here in 1990 from Saratoga, and that seems about right. So my parents bought a house in unincorporated Morgan Hill, which means it's not in the city limits, right? Out in the hills, out in the cuts, what have you. And not long after we moved out there, a neighbor moved in with 3 children my age. Now this is interesting because, first of all, children are called chill, right? Cold, to get the chills, right? Children, or kids, which is what you call the children of a goat, right? The Baphomet, George Washington Baphomet, what have you. Secondly, it wasn't a coincidence that occurred that way. Why exactly that occurred that way? But it certainly wasn't a coincidence. One of those children transferred to public school and junior high, and he would make friends with people in the village where a crew that backed up the Norteños at that time lived. There was also a large northern Hispanic gang operating in the area and elsewhere in the city. There were not many Southsiders in Morgan Hill back then in the 90s, but the out-of-town ones had a history of warring with the Northerners, and at least at one point they had killed one of them in a backyard in the 90s, right? A Northerner had gotten killed, right? Shot in the back of the head or something around the area, one of the main areas I used to, walk around, hang out in, and they're doing funny stuff with the fumes, so if I sound weird, keep in mind I'm not scared in the slightest. A bunch of nerds, the European governing class, the Jewish governing class, the LGBT, they're the type that are scared of their own shadow. So they try to get at people because of that complex. It's an inferiority complex, and it's I think it's thoroughly acknowledged in popular culture if you think about movies and so on and so forth. Okay. During that time, I was often found in the streets of Morgan Hill. Okay, that was during that time. Perhaps this affected the sentiments of the Northerners, as the atmosphere was fairly tense, and it wasn't unusual for me to be with people who had a red belt hanging, red hat, what have you. Though my neighbor had distanced himself from those groups by high school. He had a similar problem with being mixed, and as he looked Hispanic, they called him a different name. In response to pressure from the streets and various weed deals gone bad, a need for an identity, and a need to organize, I gathered other people into my own crew, which would disperse officially by 2008 or so, when in front of a Crip from Compton, or a person who claimed to be a Crip from Compton, a person who was part of my crew disavowed their membership after another had done so years before. There was no point in continuing, as they were key in founding members. People feared the trouble associated with being in a crew with me, as I had proven that I knew Crips when they doubted this before. Keep in mind that I never wanted to be ghetto. So some of you are saying, what the hell? He doesn't live in the ghetto. I basically never lived in the ghetto. I lived in low-income apartments in the southern part of San Jose by Oak Ridge Mall, which changed its name to Westfield Mall or something like that, Westfield Shopping Center. But I basically never lived in the ghetto, and I never wanted to be ghetto, right? Because I'm a romantic person. I've always been extremely romantic. It was there in my song when I was 16 years old. We'll get to that, right? That song is a key proof and a key point of reference for my mentality and what I believed and what I was trying to do and what I wasn't trying to do. Okay. It's also extremely important to the story that my whole family did not know about my relationship with various Crip gang members at first. Okay. And this comes in later, where my mother, although she sees me interact with Northerners in a certain way, and she sees me interact with the guy whose older brother is from Seven Trees, we'll get into that later, she doesn't quite process the deeper implications of the fact that I'm hanging out with gang members. And that comes into play when they're trying to save face and they're saying, hey, you know, this guy thinks all these things that aren't true, but they actually were true. And it's clear that that's the case. So in other words, you know, since my father's a brain surgeon, my mother's a doctor too, but she didn't practice. Okay, they didn't want people thinking, hey, their son runs around with gang members and he's getting bad grades in school, while they're saying their kids are going off to Stanford and Harvard or whatever, right? And that's part of the culture and the culture clash and the cultural dilemma and the identity dilemma, etc., that I was facing. So instead, they would say, hey, you know, he's mentally ill, right? You know, that he has temporal lobe seizures was what they initially said. I'm pretty sure they ended up keeping with that argument, even though various mental health groups challenged them on it, and they also challenged each other on it. And eventually I got someone with a degree in psychology, or, you know, or something to that effect, to, you know, say, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this person. I've teamed up with a bunch of people who have challenged their diagnosis. Some of them have experience in mental health, right? They might be nurses, they might be, you know, psychologists, they might be patients. They're people from various walks of life that bring credibility to my argument. I cited this one professor emeritus who's retired, Dr. Thomas Zaz, I believe his name was, and he was a psychiatrist for 50-something years, and he says that psychiatry is a fraud, and he famously said so. He's one of the most famous outspoken critics of psychiatry, and I believe he's passed away now, but he said, as you know, he was working the field over the years, he saw them add all kinds of bogus things. It says it's highly political, it's a sick joke, what have you. And I think that people know that. That's why they're called shrinks in popular culture, and they wanted me to shrink to fit, which goes back to the first video I made for this series, where I said I'm the Lion of God who never shrank to fit. And so there's a controversy there. And you can see that over the years, you see with the witnesses in my videos, I have 23 witnesses on record to the side against me. They start losing that controversy and they start backpedaling. And these are some of the most proud people on the planet. Psychiatrists, right? Pharmaceutical people. Okay, they spend tons of money marketing. They did not want to backpedal. That's key in why we're headed toward a moment where they're going to eventually have poisoned me to death and cause my death one way or another. Because the pharmaceutical industry didn't want to backpedal. The military full of control freaks, didn't want to admit that they failed to try to get me to, do what I would never do, which is assimilate. There's various things. My parents were mad at this lifelong disagreement. My little brother's more neutral. My older brother's more kind of a bully. The other day they had an argument. My father called him a bully, and he said it's very hard for him to be his father because that's kind of his personality. I don't try to, not trying to disrespect him or anything, but I'm sure we can see that getting the fact that I'm right is important. And people's kind of life stories other than mine aren't so important, okay? They're important in the sense that, hey, that's your life, that's what you went through, that's whatever it is, what it is, but this is, I'm Christ, and that transcends everything. And I've proven that definitively. And as somebody with a college degree, right, when they're saying I'm mentally ill, I've managed to graduate college, I do my top martial arts challenge, I cite, thousands and thousands of sources, I win debates and I post them. I mean, it's outrageous for them to pretend that magically the most righteous person ever would be magically mentally ill. I say that so it makes it harder for them to take it out of context. I say it that way for that purpose. Okay. So, and I never was ghetto. And my older brother did not know much about my life in the streets. In fact, no one in my family did. To make a long story short, the crew had been called a name ending in Crip. So as we ended the name in Crip, there was people who lived around me and elsewhere who were aware that I was in at least one group that was called a name that ended in Crip. As mainstream culture is and was unfair, racist, boring, and made it hard for one to find attractive girlfriends, I do not regret forming the crew. So again, that's part of why I didn't want to be ghetto. I wanted to find true love. I wanted to find something better than Belle from Beauty and the Beast, not so mature for adults, what have you. Okay, deep, caring, sensitive, gentle, on and on and on, right? I didn't want some ghetto chick. I didn't want some gold digger. I didn't want to make my appeal as some kind of guy dealing in money, or I wanted to make my appeal in terms of community revolution in progress and Christ rest in peace, which is what I explained that Crip meant to hundreds, if not thousands of people over the years, as I was explaining that I'm the voice of reason and you can't trust other Crips. In fact, the word Crip is prick scramble. Okay, if you're not for Christ, you're just a prick, right? If you're not for a morally precise revolution, you're just a prick. And of course, you put God before the revolution, and there's no point in trying after my flesh dies, and so on and so forth. As mainstream culture is and was unfair, racist, boring, and maybe, okay, I went over that. But let me bring up this briefly. When I did my research about Crips when I was a teenager, I came to the conclusion that the Bloods had formed an adversity to Crips and divided the black community and made it harder for them to protect themselves and caused them to fight with each other. And there was already gangs there, and the Blood was like an alliance, right? And so that was part of why I chose Crip. In fact, the word scripture is a play on words for Crips root. Okay, so they want to cripple them, but the word Crip was made for certain types of black people who like the color blue. Again, what color you get is more about where you're born, what family you're from, right? And where you live, so on and so forth, what apartment complex, what have you. But there's people like me who live in the country. Like there was farm dog Crips in Compton that lived in a rural area. There's the country boy Crips from like Bakersfield or something. There's various groups that are, fringe groups. And so that was there. So these people would kind of copycat, right? The cat, again, cheat, he, cat, see, he, at, right? And what have you, right? See, heat, right? That wordplay. So it was there to get people who were similar to me to try to take on the government from a logical position, trying to reach out with people and network, right? Network, right? The net, a trap. Internet, right? And so that was my intention, was to find true love, was to challenge the government about how black people are treated. The infamous kind of, are black people marginalized in the poorer neighborhoods, kind of sticking up for them. There was a lot of reasons related to that, related to the things that the Black Panthers talk about, right? Self-determination, freedom, financial justice, fair housing, and on and on. The things that, you would immediately say, hey, that's not fair. My dad is from Africa where people starve to death notoriously more than other places, basically, quite often at least. And so that was on the agenda. Everything to do with justice. The color blue to me meant the heavens. It meant justice. It meant Christ rest in peace. It meant community revolution in progress. Okay. And it also meant cripple, because the government's trying to cripple us in the black community and so on and so forth. Again, I'm not a crip when I say us. I mean, I'm kind of like flashing back to then. I'm not a gangster. I never will be a gangster again. Word set, right? A gang set. The gang is gay and G. There's all kinds of problems with it. okay, gangster, right? Gang stirring like a, they used to say the hamster cults because a lot of Jews would team up with blacks, like the Black Panthers, and they would control reproduction to that degree. And other races and groups did the same thing. And so there's all kinds of connections. I don't want to make this about that. Let's keep going. I have a lot to do here. Okay. So now for Live Oak. Live Oak is a high school in Morgan Hill that I went to when I was 16 years old. And before 17 years old, I left. So I probably left my junior year in the beginning of the year. And I was 16 years old, okay, when I got there, and just a little less than 17 or so when I left. And this one guy I had a problem with. It was like 19, a little less than 20 when I had left. So we're just going to call it, I was 16 and he was 19, but that's basically the details there. So when I first got there, one of the first days, a village member named Lokes, and I'll put his name out there. He was an Asian guy, hung out with him. Not because, I'm putting on blast, it's his street name. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to use most of these guys' names, but to show you that, yes, I know these guys, for anyone who is from the village area, what have you. And anyone who might, know about it from living in Morgan Hill. Okay. So he had fought a white cowboy-like person in the bathroom. Now, this is very interesting because that person resembled... There's a movie with Van Damme where he plays the bad guy and he wants different martial arts schools to close down. He's wearing his suit and he's doing his jump roundhouse. He's beating people up. He has a kind of evil, almost Nazi look like to him, even though he looks like a crypto Jew or something, right? He's from like Belgium or France or something, but he's like of Jewish descent or something. He has that look, right? But this person looked like that. And he also looked like someone I knew when I was younger. For my dad's trying to sell horses. That's part of the story too. We'll get to that. Whose name was John John. He also looked like this other person who dated this female named Sarah, whose older brother was like my brother's best friend growing up, and he didn't go to our school, but he showed up at the dance one day. He looked like this guy at Cardin that I had gotten into a scrap with in the bathroom of all places, which is also where the village member named Lokes had fought that guy. He fought him in a bathroom in Live Oak and in a bathroom in Cardin. I fought someone looking very similar to him, like it looked like he's his doppelganger in the bathroom. Like I threw a few punches, I grabbed him, he kind of tapped out and said he didn't want to go there with me, and he said, "You won," or something like that, and he walks away, right? And, and I considered, at that point when I was younger, I considered hitting to be kind of cheating, and that's the story from that day. When you're kids, if someone hits you, you're likely to start fighting back and you're both getting in trouble and so on and so forth. Okay. So also, when I was going to school in LA, boarding school, there was a guy on the road who was with a bunch of white supremacist types or something, and he flipped me off and he looked at me hard as he drove by. And this is part of the PSYOP. So the PSYOP was going clearly my whole life. It had been going for over a decade by the time the Live Oak incidents kick off. Okay, and this is something the government workers have admitted to me. They have admitted they have documentation. I'll probably shred it if it ever came down to it, but they have admitted that to me. Okay. He also may have said something to the effect of, and it's hard because it's a fuzzy memory. Sometimes, things get confused, but he says something to the effect of, I'm pretty sure that they're going to clash later on, and I'm better off taking the white guy's side, or stay out of it, or whatever. Okay. So there was various incidences, right? There was an incident where this guy who we're going to talk about in the story named Kyle, whose older brother was from the Seven Trees Crip gang in San Jose, as the story goes. Okay. He had jacked somebody for weed, okay, in a group. So basically there was a quad, which is the main area, like the open space area by where the lunch line is. There's a bunch of tables there. There's like in between that's like the library and some classrooms or something. And then there's this open space where we hung out by one bathroom. The other bathroom was the one where Lokes had gotten the fight in with the white cowboy looking guy. And there was these white kids who were like Justin Bieber types, give or take, who were across the way, and they did little things wrong, like smoke weed, maybe smoke cigarettes. So they were trying to, he jacked them, said he wanted some weed. They showed him an eighth, he snatched it, whoop-de-whoop. And that caused a white guy with a Confederate flag and a Tweety bird on his shirt to come toward our table. At the time, there was various Crip affiliates. Some people consider Crips, what have you, including me, and some guys from a thug group called Thug Life in San Jose. Okay. And they were basically Crip allies, what have you. Okay. And so, he tries to sit down and Kyle's giving him a hard time. He tries to shake his hand. He refuses. Shaking hands is also part of this story. It has to do with Maria. It has to do with when Kyle and I squashed the beef. It comes up again. It has to do with this moment I'm describing here. Okay, so he tries to sit down. He rejects it. It was like the next day or something. Several black guys who were thugs and gang members and their affiliates, what have you, they started throwing change at this group. I didn't approve of it, but you kind of get caught in the moment. So I saw myself as on their side, and I'm thinking, man, to some degree, part of me was thinking, this is bullshit. Other part of me is thinking, this society rejects me. The atmosphere there ain't no love, right? It's racially divided. All the blacks are hanging out together. There's different groups of Hispanics hanging out together. There's only like three other black guys who are in the school, but they don't hang out with us. So they're almost all of them are hanging out together, right? So to speak. There's the wall ball courts. There's Hispanics there. There's white guys in various groups, jocks, rockers, what have you. So it's very culturally and racially divided, and there's a certain resentment. Remember this one white guy, had said that rap is one letter short of crap. I mean, there was culture clash. So I resented him, knowing that white chicks would reject me, knowing that white community reject me, and I'm part white. I had a certain resentment for the society that communicated adversity with their spirit and their heart and their actions and their mentality and their behavior. So when they started throwing change, what have you, I'm not going to say what part I played in it, but let's just say that I was in the area of like mind, and there's batteries being thrown, and they don't do anything back. I think this incident was in the news. I think there's several incidences I believe are in the news. This is one of them. The police get called at some point, and there's a huge white guy. You can tell he's smirking in a way, or he's behaving in a way that reflects he's on the white guy's side. And to be fair, they were almost in the right. I mean, if you look at it as society didn't create this situation, which is to look at it with blinders on, then they were more in the right than the people I was hanging out with. Yeah, that's for sure. But if you look at it as they're part of this generational ill-gotten gain group, and they're the people whose ancestors came with the colonists and disenfranchised people and created the stage for them to be broke and have the certain cultures they had and kill their black leaders and on and on. You look at the bigger picture and the domino effect. Write that down, domino effect, in case people go, oh, I've heard it all and act like a bitch. Okay, then you should probably, what I would say is they deserve to be tied up, where there's massive dominoes, and then the domino that is the last one next to them crushes them. If they pretend the domino effect doesn't exist, and hey, I didn't hit the first domino, or that doesn't exist, and let them die. I'm not saying do that, but I'm saying they need to get that through their head, so I'm going to use that as an example, because it's outrageous that people play stupid about the domino effect. And there's, Min is a deity of chemistry in ancient Egypt, and an ithy-phallic symbol is depicted with an erect penis. Do, Min, O is the reproductive cycle. Odd men, odd man, the Odd Fellows was a fraternity in American history. There's a lot of connections there. Okay, so there's also a Cinco de Mayo incident. I wasn't there at the time. There's an interesting story attached to it about how I tried to ask a female that I had a crush on there, besides Maria, who I'm going to go ahead and say her name, Leanna. It's the least I could do after she did me the way she did, but, she didn't do me that bad. Well, we'll get to that. Basically, it was Cinco de Mayo. I had left already. It was my junior year, so I was class of 99, so I'm guessing that's 98, right? And so, it was the second half of the junior year, so it was 98. And I could be wrong on a fluke, but I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it's in the news. I'm pretty sure it's something you can Google. There's also been recent, in the last 10 years or 5 years or 8 years, there was another Cinco de Mayo incident on the streets of Morgan Hill. But anyway, this guy who was a Hispanic guy, who was proud to be Hispanic, proud to be Mexican. I mean, who's to tell him he's not supposed to be, right? I mean, I want people to put God first, but, you start off young and you want to be proud in your flesh and your race, and there's something to be said about it, perhaps. And so he has a Mexican flag, and he's waving it around, some kind of stereotypical way, is how it's described in the news, how it's described to me. And he goes close to a group of cowboys. Now, what happens next is unheard of, right? It's it vindicates my feeling about white people at the time. Remember that one guy also had the Confederate flag when they set up. I forgot to bring that up. That's part of what triggered my kind of sense of retaliation and violated, my sense of fair play and offended me and so on and so forth. But that guy was, what he did wasn't that smart, but arguably it was. It wasn't smart to come over with a Confederate flag. I mean, that was the only time I saw a Confederate flag the whole time I was there, and that was that guy coming to the table. But anyway, I'm starting to talk funny, so let's just wrap this up here. So to make a long story short, that guy gets jumped, a bunch of people get involved, and there's black eyes and bloody noses and so on and so forth. Okay. All right, and there was also times where there was a time where I saw two white guys who were talking bad about Hispanics. I was by myself. There were two older students, and they were bigger guys. They weren't football players. They were just assholes. And there was a white chick who was like, you should have beat those guys up or something, right? Even though there's two of them and one of me. I was a guy, I beat them up, or one of them in particular. I'm like, man, what the fuck? I'm like, they do things like that to try to test your testicles, right? It's like cops who get in someone's face and knowing that it's not smart to try to take them on. They did a lot of bitch shit like that. It's just they have some kind of beta European racist Jewish scale or something, right? Okay. So, and again, I say that partly because it's true, and partly to overkill, that it was dumb for them to try that, and it blew up in their face. Now Christ is calling them out for it. I'm the pinnacle of masculinity in the flesh, and so on and so forth. Okay. So now I will explain how I got involved with the Hispanic crews and gangs in terms of hanging out with them and buying weed for them, which is arguably like the core part of the story. Okay, we'll get to that. The core part of the story in terms of the street clashes, not in terms of the greater transcendent Horus Christ truths. So I came across a village member or associate named a derogatory term for white people, right, beginning with a C. He was named that out of a joke and not for hatred for white people, from my understanding what was told to me, as the story goes. He was a really white-looking, part white Hispanic guy. I met him while with a white female from my school, and that was rare. Like, I never met females from my school after school. That might have been the only time. I'll have to think about it. I'm pretty sure that was the only time. And there's a story to that where she was actually a rocker / Satanist, and she was there to kind of give me a hard time and set me up in certain ways. This long story. She had blonde hair and so on and so forth. So there was military-grade psychological operations going, and he brought some weed that was probably laced, which caused me to act funny. And when you talk about the game, lacing drugs is part of the game on so many levels, I don't know where to begin, right? That's why it's called, being laced up. They say they were laced up, by OGs, right? Born and trained by this group or that group or whatever. You see what I'm saying? Laced up, laced, to lace the drugs, to shoelaces. There's a lot of words that connect. So I was saying that lacing drugs is a huge part of the game. When people say they're laced up, the shoelaces, what have you. It's also lacy. Lacy. Now, some people wouldn't appreciate me spelling these things out. But again, I'm not ghetto. I don't approve of evil. People are supposed to do the right thing. The only reason you'd want to cover these things up if you want to do the wrong thing and benefit from it. Kids getting raped, females getting raped, guys getting raped in prison, Boy Scouts, churches, stepdads, you name it. And I'm not with that bullshit. I want nothing to do with it. And that's also part of kind of clearing my name, at least going the distance to do that, to please God. And curses on anyone who tries to confuse it. I've always been a man of great virtue. Okay. So again, the social clubs that control the government made it so that the government was using massive networks of informants, and they used various acknowledged technologies and who knows what else to manipulate the situation. It wasn't long before things would go bad, and a future beef with Kyle, whose older brother was from Seven Trees, the Seven Trees Crip gang in San Jose, Seven Trees Gangsta Crip, would cause all hell to break loose, and I would respond as the lion who was sabotaged, and I still am sabotaged at this point now. I've met and I know various people from Seven Trees over the years, and I have no wish to be associated with that gang or any other Crip gang. I've never been from Seven Trees. I'll never be from Seven Trees. There's certain street names there that have to do with my story. It's like King and Story over there on the east side. Okay, I spent a lot of time on McKee. I spent a significant amount of time by Tolly, the Valley Palms apartment complexes. When I was on, McKee, off McKee, El Rancho Verde, across the street from Checkers, and other places on the east side, McLaughlin, other streets, the undergrounds, apartments, what they're called. I forgot what they're called. It's like Summerside or something. That's what it's called. So, I've met a lot of Crips over the years and hung out with a lot of Crips over the years, but I have no wish to be affiliated with them or what have you. And speaking on that, there was an incident that occurred at Live Oak between a guy named Cain. For whatever reason, this guy, his name is one of the more significant names, right? Cain, right? Cain and Abel. His mother named him Cain, and I asked another dude about it, and he said, that he did not know why that was. And so I never got a straight answer about why his mom had named him Cain. Maybe she didn't. Maybe that was just his name on the streets or something. I'm pretty sure that was his birth name. He was a small guy who was very strong, very big on the fitness. And he had a problem with a guy named Junior, whose sister also went to the school. His sister was very sensitive female, very reasonable female, had a lot of loyalty for her brother. Junior he was a pretty cool guy. It's one of the moments I somewhat regret. Basically, they had some issue over the line. Kane cut in line or something. He was used to cutting in line, and people would let it go. And Junior had a problem with it. I don't blame him. And I guess he pushed him, or he put his Kane was known for, like, he was physical. Like, if he felt like walking over people, he'd like put his hands on them or something. Like, he'd push him a little bit or put his fists on him and flex and try to show off his muscle. He was fucked in the head to some degree. He had a cool part of him, but he was just a hyperactive kind of jerk. And I eventually have my issue with him later on. And he co-signed with Kyle during their beef and so on and so forth. But at that time, we were all kind of getting along or whatever. And so basically Kane decides, we're all, there's 3 or 4 of us black guys at that point, and there's just Junior, and like his sister comes in or some, maybe one other Hispanic person, and he throws up the Crip sign, right? And so, kind of carried away by the moment, seeing like, hey, this is my chance to kind of be more included, what have you, I throw it up too. And that was rather regrettable. But the beef eventually, he has a sad look, and I remember feeling bad. I had talked to him before, or I just had respect for him, and I noticed him among other people or something, and I felt bad that I had co-signed there. So there were a lot of things that made it clear to me, and I knew already, that being a gangster was wrong, hanging out with the wrong crowd, if they're gangsters or not, is wrong. Okay, the Village AB had put a sticker and was asking for trouble that said my name is on some kind of post under the roof, and said my name, Village AB. I'm like, why did they do that? That's going to bring him heat. I didn't understand that. And then Kane, I believe it was him, who had written the Thug Life on the table. And lo and behold, talking about the culture clash, the football players, they do little pranks or something. They had taken that table and switched it with theirs or something. So we go there, we're like, where the hell's the Thug Life on the table, right? And I think they wrote something like Thug Life on the table. And I might get these, maybe I'm confusing this about whether Kane wrote it or not, right? Maybe they had written it to make fun of his gang, or they did it because of Tupac. Because Tupac, had Thug Life on his stomach, and they actually had a gang called Thug Life. So I don't know. I don't remember that part. Could be mistaken about that part. And I remember there was one of the football players, a bigger guy, black hair, and he was saying something. Oh, we just did it as a prank, and he's acting like a cop or something. He looked like he might very well be an undercover cop instead of a student. But he probably was just a student, and he looked like one of these guys who I did martial arts with or something at the local taekwondo school, UAMA, and so he said something that was something you could interpret as slightly disrespectful, but it wasn't really. He said something, and then he said, well, it's just a prank, and he was kind of acting like a social controller. Okay, he wasn't acting like it was personal to him, or that it's a race war or something, but he was acting like he was conveying, social control, like a certain type of a police officer. And I had said to him, well, these guys are the types of guys who can't be shown up, that they're going to get mad about it, and they might bring guns and so on and so forth. And of course, I was right. I mean, there was some kind of other issue there. I think it had to do with, it might have had to do with the incident with the coins, but basically police officers came, undercover police officers came, and they were talking to people, and the word on the street is there was gang members from Oakland who were coming to Live Oak to engage in some kind of warfare or something, right? And even though I'm somebody who knew these guys, I didn't know what the fuck was going on, okay? I don't know what the issue was. I think that, basically an informant had told them that that was the case. And there was incidents where people came from elsewhere and got on campus, black gang members, over time. But I don't know how the timeline lines up. It certainly was not something, nothing came of it as far, I think most people would agree that nothing came up of that incident. It was, the place was hot, so to speak. It was swarming with people who were student informants, undercover cops, police officers, people with walkie-talkies. And I think that somebody walked up to me, some female or some dressed in a professional manner or some with a walkie-talkie, and said, if you have any information, we'd love to hear it. And to make a long story short, I actually did not know anything. And if I did, I wasn't going to tell anybody, because I wasn't in the habit of talking, right? I saw myself as a gangster. I saw myself as a reputable Crip gang member. And when the beef kicked off with Kyle, that's part of why it weighed heavily on me, because I saw some of my potential allies and some of the people I hung around with who I didn't entirely respect them. They didn't entirely respect me, and that's kind of how it goes. But it still bothered me. And they also tried to leverage the fact that they knew that they felt let down and I felt let down by the situation. So I'll end this part 2 by saying, it wasn't long before things would go bad. And a future beef with Kyle, whose older brother was from Seven Trees, Crip gang in San Jose, as the story goes, would cause all hell to break loose. And I would respond as a lion who was sabotaged. And I still am sabotaged at this point. And keep in mind, while I was going to Live Oak, I did Taekwondo and Kung Fu. I worked out. I was a straight killer. No one else there was. Not Kyle, not Kay, no one else there. Okay? There's a point when Randall came up to me, and I don't know how much he saw of me as a killer, but he said, to end all the talk, I want you to shoot that nigga. Now, I'm going to go ahead and leave his name out there. He was known for trouble. He slapped some dude or tapped him on the shoulder. Some stole his boombox, and it's almost like it's unbelievable. But the bus was about to leave. He ran up to the bus, knocked on the door. They let him in. He runs in the bus. They close the door. The bus drives off, and the dude was chasing behind him pretty far back, but he was still chasing him. And the bus driver might have seen, but the bus driver must have taken his side or something. They drive away. And later on, there was a meeting between that Hispanic guy. He was somebody's little brother or something. He was some kind of, somebody who had friends, and they sat down. I think the yard duties might have noticed. I don't know. They made him give back the boombox. And I had a situation in my life where these guys from Thug Mob that I was hanging out with, they would steal something like that from me, and that I would get back that thing, and it has some kind of connection to that. Now, you must make the distinction between Thug Life, the gang/crew that backed up the Crips on the south side, and Thug Mob, which was more of a west side and east side gang that was, allied to certain prison gangs, we'll say. And I'm not going to get more into it than that. Arguably, I'm pushing it by saying that again. I'm not a gangster. I don't respect gang rules, what have you. But I'm trying to just stick to the story here and not get people distracted with the, hey, he's not supposed to say that and da-da-da-da-da kind of bullshit. I've already crossed those lines clearly to a large degree in these videos. And I have no intention to unnecessarily expose things, but I'm going to expose things that are necessary to expose. Okay? And I don't respect gang members. I don't respect the street code. I don't think it's smart to try to give them credit or props or this type of stuff, right? But whatever gangster shit they did that it was smooth or warrior-like, I'll throw that in there, right? But I don't respect it because they're in rebellion against God and they're accepting the boundaries of the beast, and the game comes from the beast, right? The game is a play on words for mage, and it has to do with the occult. And Aleister Crowley's Secrete Society, right? Crete. Crete is this place in Greek mythology where Zeus in some versions is said to be born. Okay, it's an island by Greece. Okay, Secrete Society and secretion, right? Secrete Society, sex cults, it's all connected to the mythology. Mythology is mateology and mate logos, right? And there's a long story, logos meaning order. There's a long story where with the wordplay, it's acknowledged, it's admitted if you do enough research and you connect things together. And boy, I've done a lot of research and I've dealt with the streets to some degree myself. So stay tuned for the next part.